Hey there, Dr. Stephen Alonso here of the Flat Earth University, and I want to go into a little more of a deeper topic of why smart, regular, educated people will never be able to understand Flat Earth. And it goes back to the very basic foundations for, I guess, all of us as well. It starts with the prerequisites that we all met before we realized Earth was flat. A lot of it has to do with our spiritual development and the many layers that work up to where we finally went to now. And it's a process of inner development that we have to do ourselves. No one can just tell you Earth is flat and then you, sure, of course Earth is flat. I like to go back to the COVID pandemic from as early as 2020. That was objectively a hoax, and for a lot of us, we were able to clearly see that from as early as 2020. We were able to see studies that showed that 95% of people hospitalized had medical conditions. For example, it was usually obesity and high blood pressure. And again, this is right from the CDC. And even though people were able to have access to that same information, they would look at it and say, no, it's not true, because a government authority figure told them otherwise, because they heard on the news something else. And it goes into a very deeper topic about human consciousness and spiritual development overall. If your conscious mind is good, but your subconscious and unconscious mind hasn't been fully developed, your ability to disseminate information and understand how reality actually works will always be flawed. When we talk about the unconscious mind, the deepest level of us, that refers to the spiritual development that happens over years and years of work. For a lot of us, we already know that all the moon landings were fake. We know that vaccines are bad and make you sick. We know that the whole medical industry is fake and designed to keep you sick rather than curing. We know that 9/11 was actually done by the government and not terrorists. And the list goes on and on and on. But for someone who hasn't done this inner work to get to that point, they're going to look at the exact same information we have from trusted sources as well. What's another really good one? This one is from the MMRW, which is a very trusted, it's from the US government, it's their data. But for example, during the COVID pandemic, what they did was they redefined the definition of unvaccinated to include all the healthy people like me who injected ourselves with poison and then died within 14 days. And again, I'm not making this up. And again, most of you already know this as well. This is old stuff, but let's see if the highlighted part will show. So they redefined unvaccinated to include people who took the shot and died, so then they could say on the news, oh, it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And again, you can look all this up. This is actual government data. It's nothing from a conspiracy website. And I say that because even though a lot of conspiracy websites are true, people who are the profane and uninitiated to the same stuff as we are, they won't look at that, and they'll actually just look at the government data, which is perfectly fine as well. The government data is all I look at. I trust the data. It's the scientists who then lie about it and form their own conclusions. That's the thing. You can lie in a conclusion of a medical report, but the data, if you know how to read the data, will always point to what's actually true. And the list just goes on and on. Like even when we talk about injection ingredients, it's very clear that everything in a vaccine are poisons, but then people will inject themselves with that. For example, people who take the flu shot, they get the flu every year, whereas people like us who don't, we never get sick. And it's a fundamental problem in their spiritual development. And I just want to mention about injecting yourself with poisons. You'll hear people say, oh, well, you can eat aluminum, you can eat alcohol. And that's true. If you eat a poison, your body has the liver and it will process it safely. The difference is if you start injecting poisons into yourself, it bypasses the liver straight to the bloodstream and starts accumulating around your organs. This is why people get cancer, why they get Alzheimer's, and they like to think it's just a random thing that we're helpless to and it's a part of life. But that's not true at all. If you get cancer, it is 100% your fault, and we have to be mature enough to take responsibility for that, despite how uncomfortable or even rude it may sound like what I'm saying. And this boils down to what I said earlier, their ability to disseminate information and understand how reality works. So with flat earth, it's no different. It doesn't matter how much science you show them, how many arguments you show them. If they haven't done that initial inner work to reach that point where they're able to understand reality itself, they're not going to be able to understand anything because the government told them it's a globe. They grew up being taught it's a globe. Cognitive dissonance plays a big part, but cognitive dissonance is only part of your subconscious mind. A lot of people are able to work on their subconscious mind, but until they do the spiritual inner development, that takes up to 5 years. You guys know as well, you didn't just one day discover flat earth and you're like, yeah, it's flat. You might have if you already done the prerequisites and knew the foundational concepts. So a lot of people ask me, Steve, why don't you talk about flat earth in real life with your friends? Well, there's no point. First of all, it's not a salvation issue. I actually don't care. If you want to believe in the globe, you can. As long as you're a good person, it makes no difference to me at all. When we talk about hoaxes such as COVID or vaccines, we can kind of make an argument that by preventing someone from injecting themselves, we can actually save their lives. So then, yeah, should we be more vocal about stuff that actually affects their health, their long-term ability to live a happy life? Absolutely. I do believe we have a moral obligation to stop people from injecting themselves and causing themselves damage if we can try to help them. But again, as you guys saw, as early as 2020 and even up to 2022, when it was 100% concluded that COVID was a hoax, vaccines are bad, and that all you have to do is exercise and eat healthy and you won't get COVID, but furthermore, you'll never get sick at all. People were unable to understand that. And I mentioned that in 2022 because that's when I wrote the book called COVID Calisthenics. For myself, I wanted to teach people how to exercise at home because what we found out, as soon as the government, from their own data, found out that exercise and nutrition was the secret to preventing COVID, they shut down all the gyms. And again, that's because the government does exactly the opposite of what they should. But then calisthenics was the secret. You can actually work out at home, stay healthy, not need any vaccines, and not get COVID. That's why all of us unvaccinated people who are healthy, we never get sick. And then it went all the way up to like 2022 where like I remember researching it very, very well. I have like a whole stack of papers that I would just print off and read. And these are all like peer-reviewed studies that you can't really debate about because if you trust science, you trust these peer-reviewed people. But that's the thing. Even though smart, educated people would read this, they would never be able to disseminate the information properly because the foundational spiritual work in them was just flawed. And when we talk about smart, educated people, it's very important to clarify that the scientists whose job it is to lie to you, I'm not counting them. A lot of them know what they're doing is wrong. But I'm talking about like your aunt who's a nurse or your uncle who's a professor at university or even just people like me and you who love science, we study this. They can read that same stuff and come to an honest, genuine conclusion that COVID's real, we need vaccines, that we're all helpless, exercise doesn't help, and they're not lying. And that's very important for us to understand. It's not as simple as just saying they're stupid because that's just not true. So it's very important to understand that you need about 5 years of internal spiritual development to get to the point that most of you follow in this channel are. For myself, I moved to Belize maybe 6, almost 7 years ago now, but being able to work part-time doing software development for around 2 hours a day is what I did when I first moved here. I lived a very basic life. I didn't have the same house I have now and everything, but it gave me the time to actually research and study what I needed to do. And I got a great, you could say at least 3 years of dedicated focus and even up to like 5 years of that. But even before I moved to Belize, way back in Canada, I knew climate change was a hoax. I knew 9/11 was done by the government. I knew the moon landings were fake. I didn't know about flat Earth then because it takes a lot of work to get to that point. So I just want to stress how important that is and to make it clear that regular, educated, smart people will never be able to understand flat Earth. And that's why I think there's no real benefit in talking to people about it. It only causes problems. They're emotionally attached to their beliefs. And they get angry, they get upset, they wonder, what do you know that I don't know? How can you think this? And you can see that with any hoaxes. In general, if you fall for one hoax, you're going to fall for all the others. The same group of people who believe in climate change also believe that COVID was real, also believe that people actually went to the moon, actually believe that vaccines are good for you. And that's why we can tell that there is a foundational issue that goes way deeper than just access to knowledge, because in the days of the internet, everyone has access to the same information. Like even when the FDA got sued and they had to actually release the Pfizer safety studies, like this is Pfizer's own safety study, we got to see how dangerous the drugs were. The injections are causing 1.4 increase, 1.9 increase of tons of stuff. We got to see everything that Pfizer tried to hide. And even once this was released in 2022, I believe it was, the end of 2021, so early 2022, everyone had access to this information, yet they would still defend the narrative. And that is when I started writing Immortality of the Soul. This was published in 2020. And it goes into the deeper concepts about this fundamental issue I'm talking about. Why is spiritual work so important? What's all the foundational concepts that lead up to that? And in here, I just went over a whole bunch of stuff, like even the Uvalde shooting, all the mud flood resets. There's a ton of stuff. The Challenger explosion, Titanic, and the RMS. There's the 1927 photo of the globe. There's tons of, even monkeypox, or another one I'm laughing at right here is Ukraine. Remember when there was a war in Ukraine, this little teeny tiny country, and somehow that caused the global supply chain? There's hundreds of these little things that people without that foundational knowledge can't understand. But a lot of these are easy to understand. Let me also put this book back up here. I like it because it shows my six-pack. To clarify, to get a six-pack, that's only low body fat. So you can take your body fat percentage. This has nothing to do with muscle mass. Get your body fat percentage to around 15, even 10% if you have no muscles, and you're going to look ripped. The ripped look is where it shows off the muscles you have, and it gives the illusion to a lot of people that you're very muscular, but they're two completely different things. So just to clarify, a six-pack isn't hard to do if you know how to lose weight. Building muscle is very different. That takes many, many years. But going back to what I was saying, there's that foundational root that can take many, many years for people to be exposed to. And even in religion, it's not as simple as just being a Christian or just being a Muslim until you went into the deeper concepts of your religion. And a very good example of this is a Christian deliverance. When you're trying to deliver demons from someone, a Christian deliverance also works in the exact same way as a Muslim deliverance does. It has a separate name. Muslims call it something like Ruqyah or something. But the reason that Muslims can also deliver people from demons is the exact same reason why Christians can as well. And it has nothing to do with the religion as a whole. It has to do with the inner spiritual knowledge. And I'm hoping I'm not offending anyone by that. I'm not really religious myself. But to understand the deeper inner knowledge is what's universally true and what applies to anything you do in life. And I think that's so important to understand because a lot of us will waste our time trying to talk to people about flat earth, and it will ruin your social circles. It will make people not like you. And I don't think there's any benefit to talking to the profane, to the uninitiated about these topics. I really can't think of a reason how it would benefit someone to know that the earth is flat unless they've done the prerequisite work. Oh, because there's a lot of work you have to do on that. Remember, it's not a salvation issue. You're not going to go to hell if you think the earth is a globe. Knowing about flat earth helps us have a better understanding of our world. We then know that, true, we are created. Firmaments can't come from Big Bang, so knowing about flat earth falsifies the globe's Big Bang cosmology. It also lets us know about other possibilities. For example, if there is land beyond the 90-degree south parallel, for example, on the moon map, a lot of you are familiar with the plasma moon map. That's very good to know, but does it benefit the average person? And it really doesn't. And I would argue that addressing the major stuff that affects our lives, for example, the COVID hoax, when they're locking down everyone, trapping them in their house, forcing them to wear masks, that is something that's worth focusing on more than focusing on flat earth. Same with climate change, where they're increasing our tax to magically change the weather, or where they're putting restrictions on cars. For example, you can't even get a small compact truck anymore because the way fuel efficiency is all done, you can only get these big giant trucks. But again, that's all due to the climate change hoax, where people believe that carbon dioxide is linked to temperature, even though it's not, and you can look up the data for this. It's interesting because I don't talk about flat earth in real life. I never found a reason to. Some of my close friends know that I believe in flat earth, but it's not something we talk about. It has nothing to do with an actual friendship, and you don't want to make it your entire personality either. I'd rather hang out with friends and talk about stuff that I actually like, going to nature hikes in Belize, even exercising and that type of stuff. Flat earth is a hobby for me. I definitely enjoy it, but there's so much more to life than that. And I want all of you guys to take that very seriously. Don't ruin your social circles thinking that it's your moral obligation to convert people or to educate them on flat earth. And that's why even for my content that I do, I address the senior level topics. I don't really go into any of the basics. It's not really my thing. And there's also people who are better at that than me. For example, Flat Earth Dave. If someone is at the junior level and new to Flat Earth, I would recommend Flat Earth Dave's channel. I go into more of the senior level concepts, such as how gravity works on an infinite plane with Gauss's law, how the 24-hour sun is predicted on flat Earth, how the South Celestial Pole works, all of that. And those are the type of topics that I like to address. And it's usually towards people who have already been initiated into this knowledge. So it's not going to upset them that much. Whereas if you start talking to a person on the street who has no experience about flat Earth, you're going to get the same 100 questions that everyone asks. And it's just annoying to me. They can find that out themselves. So I hope I don't offend too many people with this video. Again, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm always here to tell you what you need to hear. And if you get offended by anything I say, please let me know in the comments. But it usually has to do with yourself not doing that same inner work or wanting to follow some narrative. For example, if you do not believe there's a 24-hour sun, I don't care. I do. I believe it. Like, it makes no difference to me. You don't have to try to convert people to your specific belief system, if that makes sense. We're all here on a journey to truth, understanding how the world works. And as long as you believe we live on the Gleason map, the North Polar AE projection, you're perfectly good in my book. If you are the type of flat earther who makes no claims, we have no model, but Earth is measured flat, Well, I'm going to have a little bit of a problem with that because that's kind of like the trolling where it holds you back as well. You need to make hypotheses, you need to test stuff. But overall, I think most of the flat earth community is pretty good, especially after the final experiment where we got rid of a lot of the trolls and grifters. We now have people who are genuine believers and who understand that earth is flat. Thank you guys for listening.